It should. Hold, let me see.
Yeah,
Can you
we
see
can
that?
test it. Yep,
That will, okay.
sure did. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
All right, you want to let those folks in?
I'll let them in.
Okay, get started.
Okay.
Hello, all. Welcome to our January 20th meeting, being called to order at roughly 6:04. And we'll get started, I guess, unless there's any objections to get started. Hi, everyone. So first call to order will be our attendance. As your name is called, please acknowledge. If you are here, Judy.
Present.
Miss Monet is out today. Candace Branch, present. Denise Woods.
Here.
Also present, thank you. And I believe Bianca is out today as well. Do we have any first-time guests on the call today? I know we have a guest speaker, Mr. Finley. Thank you so much. I don't know if he's considered a guest, but thank you again for coming today. As we move through our third agenda item here, we would like an invitation to the public to address the board. Is there anyone who would like to address the board at this time? I think we can put nay here, maybe not. And then as we move through to agenda point 4.1, approval of the agenda. I'll take the first motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
A motion carries, I believe is what we say. And then a second.
I'll second it.
So, all members in favor. Oh, did I do that? Not sure what happened there with the yellow line. So Miss Judy?
Yay.
Myself, yay. Again, Miss Monet is absent today. And then Bianca, yes, thank you. So we'll go through our slide deck to address any AAPAC updates. And Denise, if you'll take notes here as we move through those. So I think y'all let me know if my screen is still sharing.
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome, thank you. How do I put this into presentation mode? Guess y'all
You click where it says slideshow.
Perfect, thank you so much. Is anyone else seeing this yellow
Yeah, I
line
see
straight
it.
through?
Yep.
Okay, I don't know how I did that. I apologize. All right, y'all bear with me. So again, today, January 20th, our AAPAC monthly meeting. Just to reinstate our vision statement, the vision of the African American Parent Advisory Council is to support the academic and socio-emotional growth of African American students through peer-to-peer engagement and parent leadership and commitment. With, again, those three points of reading comprehension and math at the core, peer-to-peer engagement to highlight and enhance those experiences, as well as parent leadership and commitment. Just some updates about what's going on at the school. We've got the spelling bee competition starting. I believe tomorrow is actually when some of the first rounds are going to be starting. Semifinals will be held January 28th. And then the spelling bee finals are to be determined, but in some time in February. We have a board meeting on January 24th, an awards assembly, on January 27th, and then our Black History Month activities starting in February, and re-enrollment as well, all exciting times of the year. So just some school news and updates. Dr. Renty, if you would like to add any, please, but I think these are what we are aware of.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Mr. Finley, do you have anything to add with regards to the spelling bee? Are we,
No, all I'll say is, we have the semifinals happen next week. So we have decided to do grade level Bs instead of individual classroom Bs. So that all would be happening next week. We wouldn't have anything happening tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you, Mr. Finley. And then just an update here on the APAC t-shirt fundraising. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet the MOQ for this particular fundraiser. So it is closed at this time, and we will continue to revisit more fundraising options. It's going to take some brainstorming with COVID going around, a lot of different fundraising activities currently in place. So, please feel free to email me if you have any suggestions. I know, like, my neighbor was talking about a popcorn fundraiser that she did and she really enjoyed. So perhaps something like that. But we do have to get some funds raised just so that we can continue to enhance the learning activities that we have planned. Next on our agenda and things that we wanted to talk about was really focusing on test improvement. And one of our first events will happen Q1 with the light of COVID. We're obviously doing less interactions in person, and so that date is still TBD, but we would hope that as things progress, we're able to get an event in for the children, and mainly centered around math sometime this quarter. We've also engaged the Tech STEAM Center for a partnership endeavor. So we look forward to being able to host that event as well once, again, COVID conditions improve. And then another challenge we were thinking that maybe could happen was remote, where we don't necessarily have to all get together, but something to include perhaps the IXL or grade level dependent sort of challenge that encourages our students to utilize the additional resources that are provided by the school. So more to come from there as we iron out those particulars. And then just so you guys know, we do have a special presentation being brought to us today by Mr. Finley regarding the current STAR test results for African-American students. And so that'll be coming up. And then, yeah, this is our last slide. Here, we just wanted to see if anyone had ideas that they kind of had been playing around on how we could engage the students on both, mainly from an academic perspective, virtually, while we are dealing with the effects of COVID. So an open forum for the participants on the line to engage in any of those kind of brainstorming ideas at this time.
What is coming to my head, thinking about being remote is probably having teachers log on as if they would, not teachers, but like selected 1 or 2 or 3 teachers who's ever willing to model, log on to a Zoom session, um, probably from their classroom using their Promethean board, and really just teach parents how they teach the kids to solve certain problems. And we can try to make it as common as possible. So like, how would I solve a multiplication problem? How would I solve an addition problem? And show the parents different strategies and models that I use at school, because I think the problems that the parents are having is that the way we learn now is different to how all of us here in the school probably learned when we were in school. So they don't really know half the things we be doing on campus. So just having a call to explicitly teach them 1 or 2 models, and we can break it up into like a TK first grade model, and then a 2nd through 3rd grade, and then a 4th through 6th, to cater to the needs of the different strategies that you would use from the lower grades to the upper grades. And then we can call on some parents to actually solve using the models that was shown, and probably a whiteboard or something that they might have at home, a piece of paper, and show us on the screen to show that they understood it. So that's one suggestion.
Mm-hmm. And how would you, so how do we, I guess, what would be your thoughts on making it, I guess, engaging for the students, like how they would want to then participate with their parents on, you know, I always go to this challenge thing, right? I just feel like our generation is of a challenge, and so how do we make it a fun activity for like the parent and the child to engage in the new models learned, perhaps, or is maybe that isn't necessary, you know what I mean? But I definitely agree with you, Mr. Finley, like, you know, bridging that disconnect between what happens in the classroom and when the kids come home, and making sure that there's a, you know, engagement piece between the teachers and the parents.
We can have a challenge. So after, so like the parent and their kid could be on the Zoom call,
Mhm.
but we are more teaching the parents a strategy on how to use a manipulative, and then we could have a challenge, parent versus kid. So we give them,
Mm,
and it's like, okay, solve. Let's see who's gonna win, the parent or the kid.
yes, kind of like, are you smarter than a fifth grader kind of
Yeah.
thing. Okay, I like it. Thank you. That's a great idea. Any other suggestions? I mean, we're always looking for suggestions, and we'll be trying to implement those, and also engaging you guys on what that looks like. Math night, I'll be honest, if we do it in person, we're gonna need a lot of help. Math night on Zoom, we're gonna need a lot of help. So, you know, everyone on the call has always, you know, offered to help. So just be looking out for those emails when we're able to kind of map out what that timeline looks like.
And with if we decide that it's safe, which we may not, to hold at school, we can divide the kids and the parents up into like classrooms and probably get like 4 or 5 teacher volunteers, and we can split the people that show up into the designated areas. So we can have like a first grade room, or two lower grade rooms, 2 middle grades, and 2 upper grades. So in that way, we don't have a huge number of people in one room, and then it's going to be live. They can get some resources, some manipulative, and it might be more hands-on in the classroom if we're able to do it that way. And in this way, the teacher leads and everybody else just kind of like supports and follow along if we decide to do it in the classroom.
Yeah.
I think we had decided, Mr. Finley, that we would kind of hold off on doing it on campus because we have done this in the past in the NPR. Maybe you all have already said it. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping in. But we do think that it's definitely needful. I like where you all are going with this. And so we can brainstorm on the back end, but I'd like to maybe look at ways to keep it on Zoom for now. And even if that means sending home, you know, manipulatives that can be cut out and used. so that students can practice at home, it could be very beneficial. So we can have parents sign up, send home manipulatives, and then kind of go from there. We do have a couple of our teachers that have done this in the past, and they can facilitate the trainings for the families. But I'm happy to, Candace, all of us can kind of brainstorm offline and
Yeah.
see if we can pull that off. Mhm.
Thank you so much for that offer, Dr. Renty and Mr. Finley. Thank you so much. And then, Mr. Finley, I do want to give you some time to discuss your slides. So, parents, are there any other, things you would like to address, feedback you would like to give us at this time? I mean, we're definitely open to it. We need to. There is one topic that I haven't discussed yet, but I think we can. I'll leave it off the table for now. But again, parents, is there anything you guys would like to share with us about, the involvement from APAC, what you need to see from APAC, what you were hoping versus what you're receiving, things like that? Maybe you just want to tell us how great we are. I don't know. The floor is yours. Well, thank you. Well, all right, Mr. Finley, I will give you the floor unless you need me to drive your slides, or can you do it? Do you have ownership of the slides?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, awesome.
Alrighty. So this is a presentation that we did late last year for the board. So it's the same exact presentation since we have different audience members, and we pull it forward to make sure that we share with the APAC committee as well. This presentation simply gives us information and compares our data between the beginning of the school year to our second assessment taken in December. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Wait, where's my thing moving? Okay, so as you know, at our school, we do the STAR assessment. We do the early literacy assessment for our kindergartners, and then we do the STAR math and STAR reading from 1st grade through 6th grade. The early literacy comprises of math and ELA for the kinders, and then we have the separate assessment for the rest of the school. The last time we took this test was in November, and the results today would show you how our students did in November, and then some of it compares their results in August, so we can see the growth that has been made. Just a reminder of what the legend stands for in the color codings. The green and blue, it shows our students that are proficient. The green shows students that are at or above. So anything blue or green is where we want our students to be. The yellow means that they're close and they need just a little push. And the red means that they need a little bit more support at that time. With regards to, this thing's blocking my screen. With regards to what you're gonna see now, the blue bars represents the beginning of the year data, and the green bars represent trimester 1, the end of trimester 1, which is November, that data. So with regards to TK don't do the STAR assessment, but we do our own local assessment here. And we want to share their results as well because we don't want them to feel left out. So with regards to our TKs mastering 50% of their letter names, which is 26 letters, at the beginning of the year, we had 31% of our kids being able to master 50% of their letter names, both uppercase and lowercase. And at this point in the school year, in November, we had 92% of our TKers being able to master at least 50% of their uppercase and lowercase letters combined, with a 61% growth over those few months. So that's some amazing results for us. We are in January. I'm sure when we do their next assessment in March, we can expect them to achieve approximately 75%, if not 100% of their letter names and sounds for the entire student body in TK. With regards to math, we had our students orally count to 10. So there's a typo there, count to 10. At the beginning of the school year, we had 52% of the students being able to count to 10. And now we have 94% of our students being able to count to 10. So again, we have a 42% growth here, and now we have gone beyond the 10, and we are pushing our TKS to be able to count fluently to 25 by March. With regard to the kinder early literacy assessment, at the beginning of the year, they started with 66% of their students proficient on that assessment. And now in November, they had 84% of students proficient. So we see an 18% growth with regards to proficiency in kindergarten with the early literacy assessment. So great job in kindergarten as well. With regards to the whole school ELA, at the end of T1, so now we are looking at the blue and green portions of the bars to show proficiency. And you would see across the board, we have a lot of students that are proficient in ELA from first grade through sixth grade. You'd also see, and this is T1, you'd also see that the red is under 26%, so roughly 26, 25% in third and fourth grade. And you would see in fifth grade, we have only 12% of students in the red, first grade, only 7% of students in the red. But the numbers are somewhat consistent, not passing 30 overall as a school. With regards to ELA, when we compare the beginning of the year to T1, which ended in November, in first grade, you see that they started at 63% proficient and they dipped to 54% of the students being proficient with a 9% decrease. In second grade, they started at 55 and they went up to 67% of the students being proficient in ELA. That's a 12% increase. In third grade, they started at 51% of the students proficient and then rose to 63, another 12% in third grade. We had fourth grade starting at 54% and they are now at 67% proficient, which was a 13% increase. In fifth grade, they started at 63% of the students being proficient and they rose to 73 with a 10% increase. And in sixth grade, they started at 55% of students proficient and they too went up to 63 with an overall average of 8% growth. So there was growth in every grade level except first grade, and we are going to continue working with first grade to make sure that they are on track. So we are happy of the growth that our school has shown in ELA when compared November to the beginning of the school year. A lot of kids came back on campus after being in distance learning for a long time. And we're happy to have our kids back. And even though we know that there is an academic gap because of COVID, we're happy to see that students are still growing despite the challenges that they are facing at this current time. Moving on to math, this is what our math scores look like, or percentages look like for November, the end of T1. Something I want to point out here, when we compare our data to last year, we see that a lot of kids have graduated from the red into the yellow, which shows that we are doing really well with our intervention services that we are providing. And we know that once students are in the yellow, which we consider our bubble kids, they only need a little bit more support to end up in the green or the blue, which would make them proficient. Do you have a question? Somebody has a question?
Yes. Has there been any kind of more advanced analytics done to identify any trends that you guys want to see changed, or that pull any specific whether it's demographic or, teachers or anything like that, that, that really stands out? Like, is there anything like any outlier data that you guys have come across?
Yeah, what I will say is that the data we are presenting here is at a whole school level. What we do with our teachers on site, we break the data down even more by class, by grade, and by teacher, and that helps us determine, do we need more support in this particular classroom? We look at the student work and we look at the reports and we see the particular gaps or areas in which students are struggling per classroom or per grade. And then we have training around those particular content areas, and we provide teachers with support and directions with regards to closing the gap in those particular areas. So yes, we do dig into the data more deeply, and every teacher and every grade might have a different trajectory in which they're following in order to close the particular gap on their grade level as it pertains to math or ELA. So what I'm working on in fourth grade ELA might be something different to what the first grade teacher might be working on in ELA. So everybody has their own goal, and we do that by breaking apart the data to see where the focus should be.
Also, that was a very good question. One of the other things we're in the process of doing is compiling the data based on demographics. And so normally when we have the STAR assessment, all of that is done for us. Because we're relying heavily this year on, on the SBAC assessment, because we're relying heavily on STAR, we're having to drill down on that data ourselves. And so we're in the process of seeing where those outliers are. Is it socioeconomic? Is it, does it break down differently by race? And so those are some of the things we're looking at as well. We also rely more heavily on the data that comes in March at our next assessment that's coming up, because it usually shows, I think more closely how well students are responding to the instruction, because at that time, more than 3/4 of the year has actually been completed. But yeah, we're drilling down on the late data. We're looking at outliers as well as everything else that Mr. Finley's already identified. So good question. I also think on the next slide too, Mr. Finley is going to go over growth. So that's something that we look at as well. So where were the students coming in at the beginning of the year, and then where are they now? Again, this was data from, I believe, November. And so being mindful of that. And the reason why the growth is so important for us and why we look at that is, remember, we're coming off of a COVID year. Math, especially the way we teach math, Singapore math is very hands-on. And so those opportunities didn't exist during COVID. So our students came in low, and what we want to know is, are we making a difference? Are we closing the gap? And are we seeing growth from the beginning of the year until now?
Alrighty, thank you, Dr. Renty. And just to add on to what Dr. Renty said with regards to why we pay a lot of focus on the data in March, if you don't know, the STAR assessment kind of gives you questions across all the content that should be covered for the entire year. So at the beginning of the year and also in November, students will be given questions around topics that they haven't yet covered. So when it gets to March, at that time, like Dr. Renty said, we would have covered at least 75% of our content. So that would give students a better chance at being more successful at the assessment, since they would have covered more content. So I just wanted to provide that context.
Another thing too, that's a really good point. I'm going to piggyback on that really quickly. For language arts, which is the ELA, those concepts spiral year after year, where math are constantly learning new content. So again, if they haven't covered that content as of yet, you'll see it reflected here. So we do expect that by March, like Mr. Finley said, the majority of the content has been covered in anticipation of the SBAC.
Yep. Right, let's move forward. So comparing where we started to where we are now, remember the blue represents beginning of the year. The green represents November. So in math in first grade, we saw a jump from 65% of students being proficient to 77, a 12% growth. Second grade shows 67% to 72%, 5% growth. Third grade shows a 49% proficiency, jumping to 56% of the students being proficient, a 7% growth. Fourth grade showed 33% of students being proficient, jumping to 45, which gave us a 13% growth. Fifth grade went from 17 to 28, going 11% proficiency level. And then sixth went from 21 to 33. So we are happy to see that across the school in every grade level, there has been some sort of growth in math from beginning of the year to November. We know that math can be challenging. So we are happy to see the growth happening. And we know if it continues this way, in which we know is going to happen, we expect by the end of the year to have almost at least half of our school proficient in math or above.
And Mr. Finley, what do you expect for March with these numbers? Do you expect the same sort of trajectory, or does it kind of stable out, or what numbers are we looking for, I guess, from a growth perspective?
That's a nice question. For me, for us, I think we just want to see the growth continuing. So for example, if classes can make 11% growth, if they continue steady with that 11, 12, 7, 8, 9, 10%, is going to add up. So at the end of the year, we should actually see about 60% of our student proficient in math once that growth continues. Like we said earlier, more content would have been covered by then. So the hope is that students are able to answer more questions correctly, but I could only see it going up from here because they started really nicely. So I think with all that they have learned from November to March, they would have a fighting chance to do even better on that assessment.
So is there a beginning of year to first trimester bias for summer break and kind of just not being in the learning mode that will boost the growth during that first comparison period that we won't necessarily see reflected in the second period?
Great question. Why I feel like great question. So what I will say within the first period, the very first assessment we take is really to see where kids are at. Once we know where they are at and what they need to move on, we tailor instruction to meet the needs at that time. Then we come back in November to do a test to see the plan that we implemented from August to November, like, is it working? If we see that it's working, we're going to continue and add more. If we see that it's not working, we're going to go back to the drawing board and come up with a different plan. So that first period, I wouldn't say that it's biased per se, but it just allows us to see if that first round of services being provided and the way we are tailoring our instruction is setting us up for success for the rest of the year. So we don't really expect too much growth. We get it, but we don't expect too much growth at that time because it's only the first few months. But we know after 6 months, when we go to March, we really expect to see what our kids can truly do at that time. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
I mean, so there is a summer slide. I think you're kind of referring to that. So there is that loss of learning that happens over the summer, which you see the students, especially the upper grades, coming in pretty low. But we do see that trajectory every year. This kind of assesses, as Mr. Finley said, like what the baseline data is, what our starting point is. The great thing about Reach is we have this sort of data even during the COVID years. So we can see these trends. And the way we use these numbers, and even though we're looking at really low scores for math at the 4th grade, especially the 5th and 6th grade currently, we use these numbers and this data to help guide instruction. So we look at where the gaps are. And learning and the teachers are constantly making adjustments going forward. We will start, we're getting prepared for the SBAC, which is happening in the late spring. And so making sure the content is covered is really what our focus is at this point. We hope to continue to see double-digit growth, especially at the lower grades. And that's what our coaches, that's their responsibility to make sure they're going in, making those adjustments, providing, the supports that teachers need to make sure students are growing. What we see so far is students working hard and grasping the material. And again, March is going to tell us a lot in terms of like the input from teachers. So teacher input informs this data a lot. But again, we're waiting for those March numbers to really tell the true story of where we are with our students across the board. A good question.
Did that answer your question?
I also think like just within context, say if these were SBAC scores, which they're not, I think that maybe it's a little bit better, but the state average, and of course that's not Reach's goal, but the state average around 5th and 6th grade is usually around the 30 percentile. So if we can get those numbers up to 50, 60%, that would actually be pretty awesome, which kind of like Candace and those guys were talking about, you know, a math night for parents, so the parents can help the students. Or parents can be helped to taught how to help their students when the students are at home, because we do focus on a different type of math. However, these numbers to us are encouraging, especially coming off of COVID, because we were expecting far worse. And so we're happy that we're approximating where we want to be. And again, as Mr. Finley said, if we're double digits, say another 10 points, we're almost 30, say in 5th grade, we're looking at pushing 40 or more, possibly in March. That would put us in a pretty good range, but we'll see. So good questions.
And thank you, Dr. Renzi. So if we had to put a number on how many students we need to see these type of, you know, to get us to that, you know, benchmark that you said, 60%, I think was the number you called out. Like, is that, you know, changing the test scores for 5 kids in the classroom? Do we really try, you know, and I say we as APAC, do we take 5 of our core students and really center our programs around those 5 students? You know, what does that look like?
That's good. Finley, go back to the other slide. So where we focus on, and this is what Mr. Finley was talking about. If you go back, a couple, yeah. So on this slide, so if you look at 4th and 5th and 6th, you see those, we're calling them bubble kids, those kids in the yellow. And so it's important that you can see there's a lot of growth potential there. So those are students that are below benchmark, but they're close. And so a lot of times it could be per class about 5 students per class. And we currently have our teachers focusing on those students that are just below grade level. And we have a strategy for those students that we're working on and with teachers every day. So our teachers teach high and to keep the students that are at or above grade level challenged. But we do focus on during certain parts of our day, those students that are in that yellow band, that's the band that we're trying to shorten. That's what teachers do. And then an interventionist focus on the students in the red. And so that's our overall strategy. Mr. Finley, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, to the question that was asked earlier, with regards to how much do we dive in, this is like what we do in the classroom too. So we pull the data apart, we see the kids that are in the yellow, then we calculate how many kids from the yellow need to graduate into the blue or the green to give us that proficiency that we are looking for. And we set a goal for the teacher. So there might be 9 kids in the yellow and we only need 6, but we're going to work with all 9. But we're hoping at least 6 of the 9 get into that proficiency bar, so that could increase our proficiency percentage. And once we work with kids in small groups at a time, as we say, little by little fill a cup. So once we get some of those yellow into the blue, then we work on the next set, we get them into the blue, we get the red up into the yellow, and we keep doing that. And we utilize the small group method because we know if we teach kids where they're at, we can get them where we want them to be faster. But we can't teach everybody all at the same pace, all at the same time. So by the end of the school year, once we have our particular focus groups throughout the school year and we have a map as to where we're at and where we're going to get, we use that small groups to graduate the kids into the other categories, the proficiency level. So we do a lot of calculation to determine how many kids that might be, because it might be different per grade and per class. And then we work with those kids to get them into the proficiency bar.
So yeah, we're constantly plugging those missing skills. That's one of our strategies for sure. And that's why we, as Mr. Finley said, a lot of our instructional time is spent in small group instruction, because our goal is to individuate instruction as much as humanly possible. And so the more we teach, the students only are going to learn at the level that they're at. So we meet them at their level, we scaffold up until we get them to proficiency. And we have an interventionist for every grade level. And at the top, which I think for 5th and 6th, we have an interventionist dedicated just for math strategies. And so we're hopeful that that increase will continue to happen.
And it also goes deeper into content area focus as well by kid, because like you can look at 5th grade and see that we have 40% of the kids in the yellow, but it doesn't mean that those kids are all working on the same thing.
Yeah.
So 5 might need to work on multiplication in order to get into that proficiency category based on their data. And another 5 might need to work on multiplication. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the data, see where the missing skills are, and then separate the kids into groups and also by missing skills. So I'm working with these kids today on multiplication and those kids tomorrow on division, because those are the individual things that they need in order to be proficient. So that's kind of like our strategy as
Yeah,
well.
the whole
It's part of
process.
it, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, so this is math. What do I have next? Next, we have just a comparison whole school from beginning of the year to November. So we started as the school at 57% of our students being proficient in reading, and we are now at 65 with an 8% increase or growth. And then at math, we started at 42% of our students being proficient at the beginning of the year. And now we are at 52%. So, we are getting there. We are hoping that by March, we at least see our kids moving from 65% to at least 70 and above in reading. And if we push over 60 in math, that would be great for us as well. Yeah. And then finally, our next assessment, like we have been saying all night, will be in March, and we are looking forward to see what our students would show us at that time. So that brings us to the end of this presentation.
I have a question. Do you all use the test scores to shape the classrooms? Or is that not part of the decision-making process when the classrooms are created?
We use it to form small groups within the classroom. So the teacher will provide direct instruction at grade level. And then during small group instruction is when the work is leveled based on the missing skills that we see from these, from the assessments.
Understood.
Sorry, I have a question as well. I think, there was a lot of attention paid to getting the students, that need, that are in the yellow and red into the blue and green. But is there a...
You went back on mute.
We lost you, yeah.
Sorry, I was asking, is there a plan to, for kind of like your gifted students to kind of keep them enriched and kind of keep them pushed as well? Because, there was a lot of talk about moving from the red and the yellow into the blue and the green, but then how do we, because the thing is, if you look at the trend line, you actually had a bigger percentage in the green in those earlier grades. And so kind of engaging those people that are performing well, keeping their confidence built, kind of trying to keep that, keep those kids engaged at that same level may be easier work than pushing up as well. Not to say that people don't need to push up, but to say that you have a critical mass in those earlier, at the earlier grades, and trying to kind of work from that end as well.
That's actually really good. Like, we need you on staff, by the way. These are really, really good questions. I do want to say that we were just answering to what we're doing for those students that are performing below grade level, because that's mainly the question like, why are the test scores, why is math scores lower as we get to fourth, fifth, and sixth? But the entire instruction is designed with all those students in mind. So the reason why we do small group instruction is so that we can also, again, individuate instruction for those students that are at or above grade level. So while we're remediating skills with those students that are below grade level, we're advancing and enriching the students that are at the upper grades or at the upper echelons. And so part of the beauty of small group instruction is that we create an environment where all students are receiving instruction at their level and that they're being pushed and enriched at their level. And so when students break into small group instruction and when they meet with the teachers, the students that are at or above grade level, their time with the teacher is going to look very, very different than the students that are below grade level and what that instruction time would look like. And so, so that's why we do small group instruction. It works for us. We still have our project-based activities. We have entire WHAM Wednesdays where we do words about math and where we dissect word problems. And so we do a lot of things to challenge those students at the upper grades or at the upper echelons. And it's just really a part of how the entire classroom is set up. It's set up in a way that all different levels of learning are reached, not only the levels academically, but also the learning types. And so we set up an environment where we're constantly catering to the needs of students that maybe are visual learners or they're bodily kinesthetic learners or they're more analytical. And so we try to touch on all those different modalities in order to keep students engaged, students learning and pushing the learning forward. We also use the data that we have to look at growth on individual student level, on individual students at their level. So if we look at a student that's high performing, but we see no growth from one test period to the next, that's also an indicator that that student needs to be pushed harder. We look at those data points and we make adjustments there as well. So there's a lot that goes on and behind the scenes, as you can imagine, and making sure we're meeting the needs of all students. But we use this data on both ends of the spectrum, as you have suggested. Mr. Finley, do you have anything else to add to that?
Not really. If I'm fishing for something in my brain, I just want to say even during whole class instruction as well, when students break off into doing independent work, the kids that are in the green and blue are also challenged with challenge questions. So a teacher might present an exit ticket with 2 or 3 questions, and it would be tailored in such a way where the first question might be easy, the second question might be a little bit more challenging, and the third one is the most challenging. So we expect those higher, the students in the higher categories to go through questions 1, 2, and 3, whereby we expect those kids in the yellow to complete questions 1 and 2. So instruction is always rigorous to the point where students that are performing at or above level, they are receiving more rigorous content than the rest of the class at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it doesn't mean that the skill or the concept changes. It's just the level of difficulty changes. So I can give a worded problem. Mr. Finley went down the street and found 4 apples. Then he found 2 more. How many apples does he have now? That would be for the lower kid. But then the kid at or above might get the same question. Mr. Finley went down the street, found 50 apples, and then he found 24 more. How many apples does he have now? Right? Because those kids might need a greater challenge with their numbers. So that's all from us.
Thank you, Mr. Finley, and thank you, Dr. Renty, for presenting that information to us.
Oh, Candace, I wanted to ask one question.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
go ahead. Yeah.
And I know this is probably a commentary on larger society and what's going on with COVID and whatnot. I'm wondering, is there any talk at the state level or even at the district level about kids that are going in and out of school because of COVID, the shutdowns, the restarts, the shutdowns, the restarts? I guess I'm glad to see the test results. I'm curious about mental health and just what is being done, or if anything is, I'm sure there's something, but maybe how is that being also prioritized? Because the kids they are dealing with a lot, just like we as adults are. And so I'm just curious to hear kind of what's going on with that, or what the plan is or has been.
That's a good question as well. So Miss Venice Angel is the director of special ed. She's also a licensed clinician. And so we have a bounce back program that's used to identify students that are suffering or in trauma because of the last year and a half. And so there is a screening process to identify any students that may need additional support emotionally. And so that is also, I'm sorry, I should have put everything on do not disturb. Sorry about that. So anyway, Venice can speak to that a lot more, I guess, resoundingly than we probably could, but we do have a screening process. We do have counseling set in place. We have teachers that refer, we have parents that refer. And so we have a whole system in place as well to try to address as best as we can any mental health issues that we see crop up, and anything that requires, like, counseling or supports beyond 3 weeks or 6 weeks, I'm sorry, we're usually referring those students out to a higher level of care than what we're able to do at school. But there is a screening process. We're fully aware. It's part of our multi-tiered system of support that we're required to have in place as a school district. And with the feedback from teachers and staff and parents, we feel like we've actually done a really good job of supporting the needs of most of our students that we're aware of. And so Venice pulls small groups. She has individual counseling sessions. She has paraprofessionals that work for her as well, underneath her as well. And we feel like as a charter school, it's a pretty comprehensive program for such a small, school. Yeah, we're pretty fortunate to have an actual licensed clinician on campus for that very reason. Our kids are doing better than we thought, however, but there have been some things that have cropped up and we have been able to address them for sure. Good question. Marcus, did you know anything else about the bounce back program? Did you want to add anything to that?
No, nothing to add, just to confirm or agree with you that we are focused on those areas as well, and we have a program in place that helps support our students in need.
Thank you, guys. Denise, if you would like, we can move through the remainder of our evening here.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing, because I know the questions are coming up individually and we are responding to the questions, but there's a lot more that is happening that might not have actually been asked. So I know questions were asked with regards to mental health and other stuff. We also do pay attention to kids that might be homeless and all those other areas as well. So here at the school, like, we tap into so many different things that might be going on with our families. And, it may not come up in the meetings, but there's so many other departments that we are addressing simultaneously.
That's a really good point, Marcus. I mean, we literally have we have a food pantry. We have people that tap into us for gas carts, for food, for uniforms, all of those things we provide to our families. We have a homeless liaison. I mean, we try to cover the full gamut for sure. I mean, nobody's perfect, but we definitely work really hard to meet the needs of the individual needs of the students on our campus. Nothing more to add, Candace. You're good.
No, you guys always have the floor. Yeah, Denise, if you want, we can move on to item number 6 here, which would be approving our minutes, actually, from November 18th. So I will carry the first motion to approve the minutes. And if I could have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I believe the motion then carries. And then roll call, Judy,
Yes.
and then myself again. Yes, and yeah, thank you. And then any comments, any additional comments from APAC? I don't have any, Denise. I don't know if you do. Or Miss Judy.
Mm-mm.
Actually, you know what? I would like to shout out Miss Judy. So I have well, everybody has kids at the school. And I would just like to say that Miss Judy has effectively communicated, like every time there's been I have some behavior issues, but I really appreciate the communication and the very thoughtfulness in it. And it feels similar to my experience of that of a HBCU, where it was like, I feel like my kids are being watched like I would, And so I just wanted to shout you out, Miss Judy, and give you some props and thanks. To the point of mental health, I think that mine in particular don't get as much social activity as they may have in the past. And I think Reach is still doing such a wonderful job in implementing care to the children, but care with some actions, right? So I just wanted to shout you out there, Miss Judy, and um, acknowledge the work that I see from a parent perspective. So I don't know
Thank
if that was
you.
the form, but
No, I
yeah.
mean, I appreciate that. I want to just add to what you said, Candace. Thank you very much. We work really, really hard to be a family. We kind of see it as the minute you drop them off at the gates, there are our little ones, that we're going to take care of for you until you come back and pick them up. And so with that in mind, everything we do is centered around family. And, if we would, if I were us, all my kids are grown, but I would want the school, if my child is climbing a fence, to say, get down, and say, okay, go play, and then let mom know, hey, he climbed the fence today, because parents want to know, and they want to be able to talk to their kids when situations happen. So that's what we strive to do every day. So I appreciate that.
Most certainly, most certainly. And with that, thank you so much. It is now 7:01. I think we did a good job managing time, y'all. Um, thank you, Denise, for recording this all. I guess we'll motion to adjourn this meeting, and I'll second it. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Do we have any questions that weren't answered? I'm sorry, I didn't do that in the right order. Looks like they are. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Candace, for doing a great job as well.
Good
Yes,
night.
thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right, bye-bye.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.